Hello and welcome my Varieties 2 students. This is an introductory class to Varieties 2, which is basically a complementary class to Varieties 1. In your previous Varieties 1 class, you worked on extracts of spoken English. You analyzed them in terms of their stylistic features, and you also focused on their stylistic functions. Now, for this semester, you will be working on a different kind of text. In fact, you will be working on journalistic writing or journalistic text. We will study and examine the journalistic style by looking at the distinctive linguistic features at all levels. Syntax, grammar, vocabulary, to see how language operates within the paradigm of this style. In fact, journalistic writing is the style of writing that is used to report news stories in newspapers, and it is the same style that is used in television broadcasts as well as on radio or on the internet. It's the same style. And unlike the other styles of writing, like literary writing or legal writing or scientific writing, which can be quite complicated and pretty sophisticated, the characteristics of journalistic writing are pretty easy to spot. For instance, if you open the book, any given book from your home library, you open a book to any chapter and you set it next to a newspaper article, you probably notice that unlike the book, the article is written in short sentences and paragraphs, and it quickly gets you to the point. In fact, journalistic articles are known for being clear, simple, brief, and exact. And in this class, you will see how newspapers have a particular structure that is peculiar and really easily recognizable. Such as the big bold headlines, for example, it is intended to grab readers' attention, while the first sentence or paragraph lays out the story so that the reader knows what to expect. So these are some of the most common elements of journalistic writing, and as we progress and advance in this session and the sessions to come, you will find out even more about it. So as shown in this slide, this is outline lecture 1. First of all, we're going to define stylistics. I already know that you have a prior background about what stylistics is, but it's good to refresh your mind about the basic notions of stylistics. Then you will be introduced to the language of press, and we will see that in press we have two kinds of newspapers. We have a popular newspaper and quality newspaper. Of course, we're going to analyze each type separately. We're not going to do it in a simultaneous way. Okay, then we will be moving to talk about the English of popular newspaper in terms of these levels of analysis, in terms of the layout, titling, paragraphing, punctuation, chromatics, photography, and typography. Now, if you don't know any of these terms, we will be explaining them later on in the session. Then we will have a summary to sum it up and a home assignment to be due next week. Okay, so we're going to do a stylistic analysis to journalistic articles, but before that, what is stylistics? Now, this is a legitimate question actually to pose here. Basically, stylistics is the study of style used in text, and as you see, the word is self explanatory. Stylistics, style, okay? So it comes from the word style. So the term is made of two words, style and linguistics. So we end up having the word stylistics. So we study or analyze text styles from a linguistic standpoint. All right. So what does it involve? It involves the scrutiny and analysis of the text from a linguistic point of view by looking at the linguistic choices and techniques as well as figurative devices used in text. So when doing or when performing stylistic analysis, we first scrutinize the text, we look at it, we observe it, and then we draw data. Okay, so and we approach the text from a linguistic point of view. We are not concerned with the content of the text, but rather with the workings of the language. It endeavors to explain how text insinuate or create meaning, and how readers receive and generate meaning, and why readers react to the text the way they do. So writers, when they write their text, they have a certain objective in mind to impact readers in a certain way. Okay, so we see in stylistics, we look at how successively, for example, the writer manages to create the idea or the meaning the way he attempts, and to make it really receptive to the audience or to the readers, so that it impacts them in a way or another, thanks to his style and his choices of vocabulary, of style, of sentence structure, of all the tools available for him to make the style manageable. And it's a whole package. Okay, so they make it all available for readers, so the meaning becomes receptive to the readers. So if we go to Wikipedia, we find that Wikipedia defines stylistics as a branch of applied linguistics. It is the study and interpretation of text of all types, written or spoken, in regard to their linguistic style, that is to say, author's word choice, sentence structure, figurative language, graphological devices to establish meaning in the text. Levels of stylistic analysis. Stylistic analysis of text involves the examination of the following linguistic levels. Of course, these are not all the levels, but just some of them. So whenever you tackle a text stylistically, that is, you analyze it stylistically, you should look at all these levels and even more. Okay, so first of all, you're gonna look at the layout, that is the text form, the structure, the titles, the paragraphs, and so on. And you should also look at the syntax. Syntax involves the grammar, syntactic forms of sentences and phrases, types of sentences. Are they simple, compound, complex, phraseology in general. And you should also look at a morphology, that is wording and diction, vocabulary, are there any deviant use of vocabulary, and so on. Graphology refers to the typing effects like fonts, italics, underlining, capitalization, and even more. Phonology, of course, sound devices, techniques like rhyming, alliteration, consonants, and all sound devices. As for punctuation, the punctuation marks, especially those recurrent or repetitive used punctuation marks, semantics, how meaning is created in the text, and more. So these are some of the points that you should remember and take into account while doing stylistic analysis. Remember that stylistic analysis covers all features of language. Stylistic analysis is based on observation in the first place and description of data or of language features, and you should focus on the usual and the unusual use of language. You shouldn't focus simply on the abnormal features or the marked features. No, you should also describe the usual and the normal patterns of language, and don't ever take this for granted. Stylistic analysis is highly descriptive and objective as it approaches text systematically. It's very descriptive. You have the text in front of you, you describe it, you objectively, of course, because we're not taking into account the content of the text. We rather focus on the form, in the first place. Okay, so it's very objective, it's very systematic, because you move from one level to another. For example, you start with the structure, then you start with the sentence form, then to the clause form, then you study, for example, the kinds of connectors used, the adverbials, and so on. All right, so it deconstructs the text and studies the author's linguistic choices and its impact on the content. So let's begin with the introduction. The press or newspaper, also termed as journalism, aims mainly at presenting information of different types in a clear, interesting, and plausible way by all possible means. In fact, the primary function of a journalism is to inform the public by reporting on local, national, and global news and events. Given that journalists strive to write articles that have wide appeal and can be easily understood. Remember that one of the obvious characteristics of newspaper text is short sentences and paragraphs, which are intended to make the article easy to read and understand. In fact, the newspaper English is one of the main varieties of English language. The language of press has distinguishing characteristics and aspects that makes it different from any other text. In fact, the language of a newspaper is completely different from the other varieties of English. The newspaper text, is one of a kind and enjoys a host of aspects and characteristics that may not be found in the other texts. All right, so this will be our mission in this class, is to find out about all these aspects and distinguishing characteristics that make it or that makes the language of press distinctive and one of a kind. Stylistically speaking, both British and American newspapers consist of two main types of press. First, popular newspapers, and second, quality newspapers. So broadly speaking, we have two kinds of newspapers. We have popular newspapers and quality newspapers. Popular newspapers such as The Sun, The Daily Mirror, The Daily Mail, The Daily Express, The Daily Star, etc., whereas quality newspapers, including the Times, the Guardian, the Daily Telegraph, New York Times, and Washington Post. Luckily, nowadays, even if you live on the other part of the world, you still can get your own edition of newspaper. So you don't have to go to the bookstore to pick up your own daily issue. You can just get it by a simple click by logging in their websites and read all the news stories for free without paying a penny. In fact, all these big names of newspapers, be it quality or popular newspapers, provide digital papers for their readers. They are always available online. So, in case you are curious and you pine to know more about these two types of newspapers, then you can really try it and go ahead and read them online. So we saw in the previous slide that the British and American newspapers consist of two types. The first one being the popular newspapers, and the second is quality newspapers. And since we have two types of newspapers, it means that each newspaper has its own underlying aspects and characteristics that makes it different from the other type. Okay, so we will start today by the English newspapers and see its remarkable and striking aspects of this kind of newspapers. Alright, so popular newspapers are also referred to by the term tabloids as description for their shape, which is almost square. Now, they are termed as tabloids because their papers or because of their sheets are of square shape. All right, this is why it's also commonly called tabloids. They are called popular because they sell better than the quality newspapers. The Sun, for example, is the best-selling newspaper in Britain, 1 million copies a day, followed by the Daily Mirror. Now, can you imagine this? 1 million copies a day, so they sell better, okay, than the quality newspapers. Why? Okay, now this is the dangling question. Why popular newspapers sell better than quality newspapers? In fact, because of popular newspapers are greatly about light topics such as social events and less serious news. We don't have much of politics, we don't have much of serious talk in the newspaper. So this is why they are nicknamed as light newspapers. A further reason is that their entire orientation and concentration on the public's interest and curiosities. Such newspapers, they provide answers for public's curiosities and questions. For example, they would write stories about celebrity scandals, royal family preferences, or secrets or problems. Okay, now such topics are very interesting to the people of popular newspapers. In fact, they are classed as leisure and pleasure newspapers because the topics are mostly about entertainment. You might find topics about, about sports, or maybe topics about women, or maybe about food and recipes, or about horoscope. So it really depends. The term journalese has always been related to popular newspapers. Journalese is a derogatory term used to refer to the bad, poor, and low style of popular newspapers in particular. In fact, popular newspapers has always been on the defensive. They've always been attacked for being poor, void of content, and of adopting a very low style. Okay, But the major reason behind this kind of low classification is that popular newspapers would never resist or would never be reluctant to use any means, respectful or not respectful, to lure uh, the audience to buy them, and for the many concessions they make to the reader to persuade, satisfy, and drag him into trivialities or divert him from serious central issues. Okay, so they would always like do whatever it takes um, to drag readers to buy their newspapers. It's very commercial in nature. They would talk about people's scandals. They would intrude into people's lives, as you know, the late Lady Diana, who was a victim of this kind of newspapers. You remember, like, she could never enjoy her personal private life because of the paparazzi, that is to say, because of the journalists or reporters of popular newspapers. They would always interfere their noses into her life and into her uh, you know privacy. So this is why it's always seen and classified as of poor and low style, for being highly commercial and for being uh, you know uh, doing anything just to make good selling. Now let's move to look at the major stylistic characteristics related to English new popular newspapers. Okay, in fact, we will be limiting our analysis today or for the following elements. First, layout, titling, paragraphing, punctuation, chromatics, photography, and typography. So before we start, please go to page 75. You have figure 1. In figure 1 you have a picture of a front page Daily Mirror. Okay, please observe it, look at it. It's too sad, like this picture is colorless, but still you can have an idea about the structuring, the you know the font size, the titles and the headlines, or the paragraphs. Please look at it and think about all these characteristics before we begin our actual analysis. In figure 1, the front page of the Daily Mirror popular newspaper, Saturday, July the 7th, 1990, we can find four types of headlines. The first is reflected by the title of the newspaper, that is Daily, which is written in capital letters, while Mirrors is written in italics with the M only capitalized. Remember, please, that while you're performing this kind of stylistic analysis, to focus on everything, okay? Especially the reference. You cannot proceed in your analysis without citing where, for example, this front page comes from. So you have, as long as you have all the information in front of you, then you should mention it, and you should mention all the things that you find even normal, then mention them. Okay, So we can distinguish four types of headlines. The first is reflected by the title of the newspaper, that is daily, which written in capital letters, while mirror is written in italics with the M only capitalized. The second type of headline is illustrated by the main headline, which is written in completely block capitals, bold type, occupying almost half the area of the whole front page. The main headline of this front page is danger. These council flats can kill. Okay, so it's occupying almost half of the page, of the front page, and so this is what and you see like the word danger, so it draws everybody's attention, especially those passerbys when they pass around bookstalls where the newspapers are hanged, so they would read danger. So the first thing that really catch the reader's attention and pushes them to know more about uh, the source of this danger. The third type is the subheading of the headline. So every main headline got a subheading. So the subheading of the headline here is asbestos dust peril revealed. Okay, it's directly down on the right hand side of the page. It is written in boldface with smaller size and normal initial capitalization of the first letter of the first word, that is to say asbestos. So the fourth type is represented by the heading on the left hand side of the page, tycoon in train rover probe, where the bold letters are the smallest in size among the other types, with the lexical words initially capitalized, of course, not the functional words. So usually in writing headlines or subheadings, we never capitalize functional words like prepositions. Okay, so prepositions are never capitalized. It's only content words that are capitalized initially. So all these different types of headlines has a major role or a major stylistic function. First, to attract readers and uh, passerbys' attention, and to emphasize the special importance of titles. The more the title is big and written in bold and in uppercase, the more it is important and significant to the newspaper. Okay, so size is very important indicator of the significance of the newspaper. Okay, now we will move to the level of paragraphs. You know that normally any type of written text, including newspaper articles, is divided into small units, that is to say paragraphs. If you have a look at the figure 1 on page 75, you can see these divisions of paragraphs in every article. Okay, so paragraphs are many texts within the same text in terms of organization. That is, a text usually has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, just like any ordinary essay has an introduction, body, paragraph, a body paragraph. They could be one body paragraph, two body paragraphs, depending on the content, and a conclusion or a concluding paragraph. Okay, that's normally how texts work. Likewise, in the normal use, a paragraph has an introduction, the topic sentence, which is usually the first one in the paragraph, and every paragraph has a body or supporting sentences or amplificatory sentences, and a concluding sentence where we have a summary or a conclusion. Any paragraph written in this way can be described as a well organized paragraph, which is not the case with popular newspapers. Popular newspapers are not organized in this pattern. Let's look at how popular newspaper paragraphs or texts, how are they organized. Paragraphs in popular newspapers are not well organized. In fact, there is no sign at all of any kind of organization. In Figure 1, articles are divided into paragraphs at random despite their good visual layout. Now, if you look at them, okay, you might have this impression that we have here an organized text with organized paragraphs. But when you read them, in fact, it's not the case as you would think. So, a careful consideration of these paragraphs would lead us to discover that each consists of one sentence only. Okay, so we don't have real paragraphs in the full sense of the word. In other words, there is only individual sentences which look like paragraphs but only structurally. So, okay, so you might think like this is a paragraph, but it's not a paragraph, it's only a one sentence long. All right, so maybe in terms of the structure it looks like a paragraph, but it's not. In fact, this is the normal structuring of paragraphs in English popular newspaper. Take for instance the division of the leading article on the right hand side above figure 1. Okay, fine. So there are 5 short sentences. The second, the tenants live until can kill. It's been very short, each of which represents a paragraph. All right, so where is it? Yes, after you read the headline, the subheading, we have the first paragraph. The tenants live in fear of high levels of asbestos, the deadly dust that can kill. Now, this is a whole paragraph that is made of one sentence. Of course, this is unusual in any English written material of any kind, but this is the rule in this variety, that is to say, English popular newspaper. This is how paragraphs are written. Paragraphs can be written in they can consist of one sentence only. Okay, and we'll see the reason why they do this kind of structuring. This misorganization of paragraphs is functional, aiming at emphasizing every piece of information. Okay, so it's almost every piece of information has a single paragraph. That is, by promoting each sentence to a paragraph status, it is meant to be stressed on in closing an important idea. Thus, we have one idea, one sentence, one paragraph. Another significant stylistic function of short paragraphing is to help readers scan and skim, that is to say, have a quick look and overlook some parts of the article they are reading. Also, the disorganization and shortness of paragraphing would indicate the informality of style of popular newspaper. Okay, now let's move to punctuation. Punctuation marks are meaningful in English. They are used to help express several important meanings. Popular newspapers usually discard this important role of punctuation. The exclamation mark is used for different purposes. For example, the same old story with candidates, words, not deeds. Here, the exclamation mark is a reflection of the sarcastic style of statement. You can draw, a satirical kind of tone here, which implies that election candidates never changed. They make many promises without having the means to meet them, or even when they are in power, they forget them. Okay, so that's why the writer uses the exclamation mark here just to show a kind of sarcastic or to show sarcasm and satire to the situation. So the same old story with candidates, words, not deeds. So, in fact, the sentence with the aid of the exclamation mark implies a piece of advice to the public not to believe election nominees who are basically liars. Therefore, the function of the exclamation mark here to express irony. Okay, and the second function, it could be used to show surprise as well. As for brackets, dashes, and quotation marks are frequently used to emphasize the important information. Now, whenever we have an important information, we put it between brackets or dashes. For example, in the second paragraph of the leading article, asbestos dashed in figure 1, the dash is used before the deadly dust can kill. Okay, now it's not used abruptly, but it's used for a purpose to give the content more importance because it is the focus of the whole article. Now, whenever you find any information, any piece of information between dashes or quotation marks, it means that this is of high and prime importance to the writer and to the newspaper. Likewise, the quotation marks are used in several places in the same article to highlight significant words and phrases, like the most dangerous in Britain in paragraph 1, okay? Or catalogue of neglect between quotation marks in paragraph 3. Or space suited in the caption under the main picture. Okay, it's also put between two quotation marks. So this is all to stress both the unusual term and the dress illustrated in the picture. Finally, the comma is omitted, but when used, it is used informally and abruptly to avoid frequent interruptions while reading and to facilitate skimming and scanning. This is why authors or journalists avoid using the commas because it interrupts the flow of reading. So to sum up, punctuation all in all is usually insignificant in popular newspapers. It doesn't really play a major role. Now let's move to another level of stylistic analysis: chromatics, photography, and typography. Chromatic is the study of colors. It has recently become important for popular newspapers to use colorful front and back pages in particular. In figure 1, too sad actually that it's in black and white, but according to the textbook, colors are perfectly exploited both in writing and in illustrations. So to make the whole page more attractive, more interesting, and more picturesque to readers. So generally they use popular newspapers rely a lot on using colors and photographs and pictures. The front page is full of pictures and photographs, and also all the titles are of different size and of different colors as well. This makes it really perhaps appealing to the readers. As for typographical devices, we may note that bold facing and capitalization of an important term are used, such as deny in the fourth paragraph of the leading article. Okay, so for we use the bold facing and capitalization for anything that is important and of weight. So to sum up lecture 1, titling in popular newspapers are important and vital, especially the front and back pages. They are used in different ways to attract the reader's attention and imply a variation of emphasis and significance of news. In terms of paragraphing, paragraphs are short and not really well organized, and this is to accentuate all the information. Like every piece of information is important, that's why we promote it to the status of a paragraph. This helps readers scan and indicate formality of style as well. In punctuation, we note there is heavy use of question marks, exclamation marks, dashes, brackets, quotation marks, while commas are used abruptly. For the question marks used to get the readers engaged in communication with what they read. Exclamation mark to imply irony, sarcasm, and surprise as well. As for dashes, brackets, and quotation marks are used to emphasize important information. The commas are used at random to avoid interruptions of reading and facilitate skimming. Chromatics are widely exploited to make the newspaper look more attractive, interesting, and appealing to readers. Photography is used to attract and fascinate the public, while typography to highlight something important. This was all about today's lecture. See you next week.